On this World Press Freedom Day, marked as it is by a global pandemic that emerged into an environment of rising repression, censorship, politicization, and denigration of expertise and science, I want to make several points about the importance of independent journalism, the importance of access to information, and the importance of freedom of expression globally in order to fight and to meet this public health challenge. The first point I want to make is about access to information. Around the world over the last several years, we've seen an increase in the number of laws that support and provide access to journalists and to regular citizens to access information that is held by public authorities. But there's also a parallel requirement, and that requirement is that governments also provide honest information to the public. That should be the default. It shouldn't be a request that individuals must make every time they want to seek information. And the first question we should be asking, in my view, is what are governments doing to provide information to the public? To what extent are governments making it easy for people to gain access to information, not just about politics and other matters of public interest, but to what extent are they making information available related to the global pandemic and to the public health steps that everybody must take in order to be safe and healthy? The second issue is access to the internet. Unfortunately, over the last couple of months, much as we've seen over the last several years, we've seen a continuing limitation on access to the internet around the world. Of course, this is well known in places like Kashmir, but we've also seen incidents in places like Ethiopia and elsewhere. It is imperative that the internet be open, that the speeds be such that people can gain access to the global flow of information in order that they may share information and understand the steps that they must take in order to meet the global health challenge that we're all facing. In addition, at this particular time, I think it's important for us to restate the importance of having an internet that is accessible to all, not just to those in wealthy countries or wealthy communities, but to those who lack access otherwise, to the disabled, to the vulnerable, to many others who do not normally have access to information. This could be a particular moment to provide extra energy around the efforts to provide access to the internet. Third, and critically, is the importance of government promoting and protecting journalists and journalism, protecting the media of all sorts, but especially independent media. Unfortunately, we've seen over the last several years rising repression of journalism, of reporting, of the sharing of information. We've seen this in a variety of contexts. In the context of counterterrorism, where in many places we've seen the redefinition of journalism as a form of terrorism. Especially at this particular moment, it is essential that governments promote journalists and promote independent media, even if that means classifying journalists as an essential worker. That is absolutely critical to ensure that journalists are able to do their job for the public. At the same time, I think it's important to emphasize something that many of us and many of you have been emphasizing for years, and that is the problem of the criminalization of journalism and the ongoing detention of hundreds of journalists around the world, particularly at a moment when the threat of being in prison is now a threat to one's life. It is essential that governments release all journalists, all reporters, all media workers held in prison at this time. And going further, they should use this as an opportunity to decriminalize journalism, decriminalize defamation, decriminalize other sharing of information in the public interest. I also want to mention one other area which is absolutely crucial at this time, And this is the question of how to deal with disinformation. Of course, it's critical for governments to be honest with their people. It's important for governments to be clear about the nature of the threat and to be clear about the steps that people need to take in order to meet the threat of the pandemic. At the same time, it's clear that there will be nefarious actors who will seek to disinform the public, to raise questions among the public about the nature of public health steps that need to be taken. For governments, it is essential, and the WHO guidance on this is in parallel with this particular requirement. It's important for governments to correct the disinformation. It's important for governments to provide accurate information. It's important for governments to do all the things necessary to ensure trust in the nature of public health information sources. That is where attention should be paid today, not to the criminalization. The same can be said for online sources. I think that what we're seeing right now is a relatively aggressive approach of online platforms to dealing with disinformation, which may be entirely appropriate at this moment of a global pandemic. But at the same time, as many of the world's workers, including social media's workers, have gone into working at home, into lockdown, many of the tools of content moderation are simply not available as they once were. And therefore, I would strongly urge all companies to do the kind of human rights due diligence that is necessary in order to ensure that the content moderation that they're doing is absolutely essential for public health and that it is consistent with the guidance of public health authorities. And finally, the issue of public health surveillance. It's clear that there is an important role for public health surveillance as a matter of intervening in the spread of the disease and the spread of the pandemic. It is essential that those tools of surveillance be limited to purposes of public health, that they be limited in time to the challenge of public health, and that surveillance not intrude on other fundamental human rights. I've just released a report that details these 5 challenges in particular. I urge you to read it and to provide me with comments as you see fit. In closing, at this time of global challenge, I wish all of you good health and safety, and I look forward to a time after the pandemic when we can celebrate World Press Freedom Day together. Thank you.